Just for like 5 minutes, just to get to know the spirit of Amanita. So go ahead and settle into your seat and finding a comfortable position to just hang out with us for a little bit. Closing the eyes. Maybe turning off the phone or any distractions in your mind, just letting them go. Bringing your awareness back to the breath whenever the mind begins to wander. With every inhale, getting a little bit deeper into this moment. With every exhale, letting go of something that's not serving you. If you have any discomfort in your body, maybe breathing some space, breathing some openness into that area. With every exhale, releasing that tension. Releasing the neck and the shoulders, releasing the tongue from the roof of the mouth, releasing the arms and the legs, finding that comfortable seat. So as we settle in, we're going to go on a little journey. Starting off your journey, walking through a field. You can feel the grass between your toes. You can feel the warm sun beating down on your face. You don't remember how you got here, but you know that you are here for a reason. As you approach a tree line, you realize that you're supposed to be going into the forest. There's something beckoning you into that deep, dark space. It's unfamiliar, but it feels okay. As you get closer, you realize that the trees are pretty tall and this forest is pretty dense. You walk into the forest. The temperature is cool. You feel a cool breeze coming. The smell of moss fills your nostrils and your lungs. You walk along a soft trail, feeling the pine needles and the humus of the forest welcoming your feet. You begin to notice little squirrels, birds, lots of little mushrooms, little insects, centipedes. You start to go deeper into the woods, and the time of day kind of slips the mind as you go deeper into this space. Feeling the light flickering through the canopy of the trees, tickling your eyes. You go deeper in, you see a mix of hemlock, pine trees, birch trees. As the forest welcomes you in deeper, you begin to notice more of the life forms around you. And off in the distance you see a mushroom growing under a pine tree. a little red mushroom, but it's very bright and it snags your attention. So you begin to walk towards this mushroom. That sense of timelessness gets a little deeper. In that liminal space, just allowing your intuition to guide you along your path. And as you approach this mushroom, you realize that this tiny mushroom is actually quite large. The closer you get, you realize that this mushroom is actually much taller than you, much larger than you. And that distance was an illusion of size distortion. And you notice at the base of the stem of this mushroom exists a little doorway, a little opening. And a little nudge from within says, go ahead. So you walk towards this mushroom door and walk on in. You notice that this stem is quite large, like a little house. And in this house, there's a table. You approach this table, it has a small box. You walk up to this box, and you open it up. And the first thing you see is the first thing you thought of. And it's unique for each of you. Perhaps a sense of peace or reassurance washes over you. Perhaps more questions arise. But there's a gratitude for this space, this mushroom. Think, oh, it must be getting pretty late. I should probably go back home. Maybe you've been in the forest for hours. Maybe it's been minutes. So you exit the mushroom house. You turn around and bow to it and say thank you. Thank you for your lessons. Thank you for your knowing. Thank you for your wisdom. And you turn back, walking on the trail, back out of the forest. Having a sense of lightness, perhaps. Having a sense of gratitude, but more importantly, having more of a sense of connection to yourself and to the world around you. And if anything, that is what the mycelium teaches us. So in your own time, in your own way, coming back to this space, back to this body, gently opening your eyes, maybe rolling your shoulders, taking a deep inhale and exhale. guys for coming on that journey with me. Give you a couple minutes to unpack. And if anybody is feeling called to share what they saw in the box, share that. If not, it's totally fine. It's also fine if you didn't see anything.
I saw grass for some reason.
Grass?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I couldn't get the box open.
Couldn't get the box open? I've never heard that. We'll talk about that.
Okay. I need to.
There's a serum for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna thank you for that.
A honeybee. That's good. Yeah. Well, we know about the honeybees and mycelium. They seek that liquidation. Check. Thank you, Daniel. Anybody else? You sure? Anything? How's the volume on this?
Better.
Better?
Yes.
Make it go up? Do you want it up? Okay.
Which I think that little tiny thing.
Oh, yeah. Is this the volume right here?
Mm-hmm.
Volume. How is this? Is that good? Alright, cool.
An echo.
It's got an echo on it. Do you have like a reverb?
Yeah, but I guess I got the
Okay, there we go. That's better. We turn this off. Alright, so, okay, anybody else? Why is this reverbing?
Yeah, I don't know.
It might be that needs to be like away.
Sometimes it's
Phase.
Talking
here.
Okay, how about that?
That's good.
Is that alright?
Yeah.
Is that alright? Okay, cool. Just go. I'll just stay away from that.
Well, why don't we move that speaker over?
Yeah, we can move that over to that corner. There we go. Okay, thanks. That's gonna bug me. It's gonna bother me. So, Amanita muscaria. How many people, show of hands, have heard of this mushroom? Okay. How many people have consumed this mushroom? Okay, all right, like 30%.
I don't think you were allowed to.
And how many people were here last year for the talk that I did with Kara? Okay, great. So, yeah, this is the second time I've been to Ohio Mushroom Festival and the second Ohio Mushroom Festival, so that's pretty cool. So, yeah, thank you, Vint, and the whole team for hosting this. There's Vint. Woo! Yeah! Hey! He's the man. I just want to hear a couple things. Whenever you think about Amanita muscaria, what do you think of? Anybody want to share anything?
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus, all right, classic, yep.
Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland, yep.
Frogs.
Frogs. Toadstool? Yep, all right.
I just get the picture in my mind. The red cap, the white dots.
Yes, it's very much like, hey, notice me.
Very.
Mario.
Yeah.
It's the mushroom emoji.
The mushroom emoji. Yeah, you guys are like doing my speech for me. So,
Except for here, it's yellow.
Yep, we have the yellow fly agaric here, the Amanita muscaria gisowii or chrysoblema. But there's something interesting about that color, right? That bright red. A lot of times in nature, that's like a warning sign, like don't eat me, like don't mess with me. And I think whenever you start to get into these mushrooms and plants that could be potentially poisonous, but also medicinal in different preparations and different stages of life, there's a lot of nuances to it. And I remember the first time I ever saw the Gasawi eye, which is the yellow flagger. I was like 16 years old, and it was in my parents' back meadow, and I just remember being like, whoa, I am like scared and like really intrigued by that thing. And little did I know that this mushroom would start to become one of the major parts of my life. Over the last couple of years, I've been working with Amanita muscaria, and it's not working again. Okay, there we go. So yeah, it's hidden in plain sight. It's interesting how whenever you think about the word occult, not cult, but occult, it's really about like esoteric knowledge, and it's things that are hidden in plain sight. So this is a mushroom that grows on every single continent. It grows in almost every part of the world, and little is known about this mushroom. And there's also, it's shrouded in mythology and mystery. And also too, if you prepare it in certain ways, you can have really not good experience or difficult experience. And if you prepare it in other ways, you can have like a really therapeutic experience. So there's kind of this mystique around it, and it's really not something where you can just be like, oh, okay, yeah, what is this? I just want to like take it and like, what's the effect? It's like, well, how much time do you have? And like, are you really wanting to develop a relationship with this mushroom? And whenever you work with herbs and mushrooms, I think that developing a slow relationship is the best way to really get to know them as a being or a spirit. So I like to start my talks with like I could talk all day about all the intellectual things, but starting off with like, let's get to know the spirit of this mushroom in whatever small capacity I can, at a mushroom festival with a group of people. I think that's like, whenever I talk to Amanita, I'm like, what should I be doing? She's like, do a little, go meet me first, and then we'll talk. So, esoteric knowledge, occultism. So, where I started working with Amanita muscaria on a personal level was a couple of years ago. I realized that I had to stop smoking cannabis. I had a pretty lifelong habit with it, and it negatively impacted my life. I was, mentally addicted to it, where you can't physically get addicted to it, but mentally you can get addicted to anything. So for me, I knew I needed to quit. It was at this one party, and it was also the same time that somebody introduced to me microdosing Amanita muscaria. And I was like already making extracts and stuff and working with mushrooms at that point. And I was like, why would I microdose that poisonous mushroom? Like, are you crazy? And nothing really happened. I started to slow down with cannabis, but then it was like she was sending messengers to me. She would, 2 more people were like, hey, I microdosed Amanita, or I took a large dose of Amanita. And I was like, okay, well, you're not dead and you're not like crazy, so like what happened? And they're like, well, not much happened during the experience, but it's been like 2 or 3 weeks and I still have this long-lasting sense of peace. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm going to look into this. So I continued to learn more about this mushroom, and then eventually started to order my own mushrooms from Europe, and began making little microdose ice cubes from it. And I would freeze them and then pop a little microdose, and I noticed that really like the weaning off of the cannabis was a lot easier for me. I was also smoking CBD to kind of like get something similar, but like wean my way out of that. And then eventually I just quit the cannabis plant altogether, which for me was a good choice. And it's not to diss the cannabis plant at all. I was abusing it, and so, you know, that relationship wasn't good. So then I started to think, well, maybe I can make tinctures out of this and then send them to other people in the country so I don't have to like ship ice cubes. And then I was working other jobs at the time as like a contractor, and every time I would make a new batch and put it out on my website, I would sell out, and then I would double it and I would sell out, and eventually I was just like, okay, I guess this is my job now. And I had to tell all my landscape clients and carpentry clients, like, I quit, I'm sorry, I can't rake your leaves anymore. This mushroom's taking over my life. So here I am, like 3 years later, fully supporting myself and my family. My partner Maria and I are having a baby in February. And this mushroom has helped me through so many different difficult periods of my life, and ultimately brought us together because I was hosting an Amanita ceremony, and she came, and I had butterflies. So yeah.
I only went because of him.
She wanted the healing too. But
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Then so that's really like kind of where I came from with this mushroom, and so I pretty much have, you know, I'm not like, a lot of people might call me one of the Amanita guys, but it's not all that I do, but I feel like I am an associate of the mushrooms, like some mushroom people feel. We got one right here, Travis. And it's really like, they kind of tell me what to do, and whenever people are like disrespecting them, I'll get really angry. So, and then they tell me to chill out. So, anyway, so we're going to talk about the history and mythology about Amanita. So there is a lot of anecdotal evidence for Amanita muscaria use in ceremonies, in ancient cultures and indigenous cultures, and so we're going to talk a little bit about like some of the more theoretical things. So anybody familiar with Gordon Wasson? So he was I guess an archaeologist, kind of explorer, author guy. He's a banker and a mycologist? Okay, I was totally wrong. But he's a guy who likes to investigate things. And he did the China study, I believe, right? And one thing that he started to look into was the concept of soma. Is anybody familiar with soma? It's in the Rig Vedas, ancient Hindu text. There was this ancient technology, or a plant, or a mushroom, or a brew, or potion of some type of thing that they would use to, basically it would grant you like eternal strength and immortality. And there's different theories on it. Some people say it's psilocybin, some say it's like an alien technology. Gordon Wasson postulated that it might be Amanita muscaria. Amanita muscaria, there are different ways to prepare it, and the Rig Veda talks about with soma that there was like 3 filters. So Gordon Wasson was postulating that there are 3 filters to prepare Amanita, and so he was describing this like, you know, this process might be, you know, the filtration and preparation of Amanita muscaria. The first one being dehydration. So you pull a mushroom, you dehydrate it. That's one level of decarboxylating it, which I'll get into the chemistry in a little bit. Then the second level of filtration would be to brew it and filter it through like a woolen cloth. So making a tea with water and then pouring that and separating the mushroom material from the tea decoction. And then the third filter being the human body. So whenever you consume this tea or a mushroom, you can actually drink your urine and recirculate the psychoactive effects. And the body itself, through all the stomach acids, decarboxylates, at least partially, ibotenic acid into muscimol, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So that was his theory on it. And you know, you could chalk it up to philology or like a stretch of the truth, but I think it's interesting. I don't really buy into it, or I don't really buy into a lot of different theories. I like to play with ideas, so I think it's important to address these. Another theory was that the berserkers, so like the Nordic warriors, were using Amanita muscaria before they'd go into battle, and they would go into this like drug frenzy where they would be like kind of like incoherent and like just like hacking away at anybody who got in their way. Because whenever you take Amanita muscaria in like very large doses, you can get into a delusional kind of state. But personally, I think that they were probably working with things like datura or henbane, other psychotropics from northern and middle Europe that can produce these kind of deliriant trance-like state for days on end. Amanita muscaria in high doses can produce something like that, but more or less it's going to be about having like a deep trance, like dreamlike state. So it could be that, but another theory I had was that these people were like consuming raw mushrooms, because high amounts of ibotenic acid before the mushrooms are prepared and dehydrated, they can have like a speedy euphoric kind of effect, which may warrant, like a drug-fueled war frenzy berserking. So that's another theory. Another theory too is that the Celts used Amanita muscaria. There's not a lot of evidence about that for a couple different reasons. The Celts didn't have a written language for until like the last couple hundred years of their reign. They had a lot of verbal, passed down knowledge. Another reason too is that the Romans kind of wiped out their history, and as we know, the Romans have wiped out a lot of things that are not Roman history. So there's another theory, and then we have some motifs though, and if I'm going to pass around this book too if people want to flip through. This is the Fly Garrett Compendium by Kevin Feeney. He's a friend, colleague of mine, and it's the modern day Bible of Amanita muscaria. It has like everything you could possibly think of. And if anybody's interested, I do have those for sale over here, but we can just pass that around. He worked with a couple different authors and edited this compendium, and some of the theories with the Celts are like, they're kind of a stretch, like one of them was this red speckled salmon that's talked about in poetry and like stories and motifs a lot in Celtic lore. And it's not just like any red speckled salmon that you eat. It's like a red speckled salmon that like is like a doorway to the divine, and you like consume its flesh and gives you like all these powers and everything. So that could have been kind of like a hidden symbol, like going back to that hidden in plain sight, occult knowledge that may have needed to go underground whenever the Roman Catholic invaders were like trying to wipe out everything. So that's one theory. Yeah, and then there's other theories talking about Bridget, like with her red hair, and the magician wearing red and white. Yeah. So, anybody have questions about that?
Bridget is Irish, right?
Yeah.
And they almost don't have red hair. So.
I know, yeah. So, I've read through all of it. I mean, I'm Irish. I'd love for it to be true, but I'm always skeptical first, usually.
So, with them eating the mushrooms raw with a high IBO, is that toxic? Does it build up as a toxin in your body, or what?
So it's metabolized into muscimol through the gut, and then you would pass a lot of it out with your urine. But you have effects from ibotenic acid.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think it builds up. Yeah, I mean you can develop a tolerance with muscimol and ibotenic acid. Ibotenic acid stimulates glutamate, so it's like this really speedy kind of Adderall energizing feeling. Yeah.
But it's nothing that's really going to do any damage.
Well, I mean we'll talk about it. Yeah. There's the Siberian shamans did use Amanita muscaria, and parts of Siberia may still use it today. Here on the left we have Tatiana from the, I believe it's the Kamchatkan Peninsula in Siberia. She's wearing red and white polka dot shirt. She was an Amanita shaman. And there's actually YouTube videos of her. If you type in like Tatiana Amanita muscaria, you can see her, like, she does her spinning and dancing, and she's a very charismatic person. And a lot of that use has been wiped out from the Russians coming in and kind of like giving them vodka and like replacing their sacrament with this like poisonous alcohol. And so that's unfortunate. And then we have the Sami reindeer herders or reindeer followers. So they follow the caribou. This is in modern day Lapland, which is like basically as close to the North Pole as you can get. So this is where the Santa Claus mythology comes in. So the Sami people would have these shamans who would come around and they would collect the mushrooms, and then winter solstice is just after, like a month or two after the Amanita muscarias are harvested. Now these are little red and white gifts. They grow under pine trees, right? Christmas tree, little gifts, and then you can, oftentimes they would have them hanging in the pine trees as well, which could be used for a couple different purposes. So you can dehydrate them, but you can also like help spread the spores if you have them up higher. Those are a couple different theories. And then, so during the winter solstice in this northern part of the world, there would be snow that would be oftentimes blocking the front doors. So these shamans would come in and through not a chimney, but like a giant smoke hole through the roof, and to enter the house, and they would be the ones giving gifts. There's a couple theories, like maybe they were giving Amanita muscarias to these people, and they would go to the spirit world and come back, and he would kind of be like their trip sitter. But also other theories are like, tell me what your problem is, and then I take the Amanita muscarias, and then I bring back medicine from the spirit world. So there's a couple different theories on that. But just imagine this man or woman carrying a sack full of Amanitas going through your roof and giving you presents and visiting everybody. So there's a lot of different theories about Santa Claus, and then you can get into the whole like, why is he wearing red? Because that really wasn't until like Coca-Cola capitalized on Christmas. But it's a fascinating rabbit hole that really doesn't have an end, but it's fun to postulate. Yeah, but the Sami really do use Amanita muscaria. Not a lot of them anymore as well, but the caribou actually like to eat these mushrooms. So we have, again, another Santa Claus motif, which is the flying reindeer, right? So they would eat these mushrooms, and they'd get drunk and inebriated on them. And there's other animals too that like to eat them, like goats too. So that's some of the stuff that we do know for sure. And then the picture on the right is just funny. It's like a caribou peeing on a present, so I had to include that. Don't ask me why. All right, any questions about any of that stuff, or we can move on to chemistry? So we're going to talk about two main compounds. Amanita muscaria has a ton of compounds in it. Actually, it has bufotenine, if anybody knows what bufotenine is, which is the psychoactive compound in the Bufo alvarius toad. Ibotenic acid is the first one that we're going to talk about here. So a lot of people try to avoid or are stigmatizing ibotenic acid. And I think for people who are starting to work with Amanita muscaria, it may be best to avoid it and then start working with the muscimol, which we'll talk about in a sec. But ibotenic acid stimulates glutamate, so it's very energizing and very speedy. it can be very euphoric, but it can also have negative side effects. In large doses, you could vomit or have diarrhea or have excessive salivation, and it can be pretty nasty. I've eaten like raw amanitas a couple times in high doses just to experience it, and they're challenging experiences. That ended up being fun after like the first 2 or 3 hours. The rest of the day was fun, but and then there is some concern that ibotenic acid could cause lesioning in the brain, but we don't really know the efficacy of that with human oral ingestion. All we've seen that in is with rat studies where they're intracranially injected with it. So. Yeah.
The ibotenic acid causes the muscarinic side effects, like hot as a hair, dry as a balloon, all that stuff.
Yeah.
As a bath.
Yeah. So yeah, muscarine is another compound that's found in Amanita muscaria, and it's really a very small concentration. If anybody's familiar with the jack-o'-lantern mushroom, they have very high concentrations of muscarine, which can produce similar side effects as ibotenic acid. They like kind of overlap a little bit, but ibotenic acid also is psychoactive, so you would have more of this like kind of mental, speedy, euphoric, but you also do have those like that, like, you know, you're really hot, cold sweats, things like that. But the funny thing is that ibotenic acid also decarboxylates in your gut, so you could ingest a mushroom, feel that ibotenic acid effect, and then like maybe an hour or two later you start to feel like this like relaxing kind of effect, and it's like basically you're having this chemistry reaction going on inside of you. So ibotenic acid actually decarboxylates into muscimol, so it loses a carboxyl group and then it becomes a different compound called muscimol.
Is ibotenic acid a liver toxin?
No, it's not. It's not hepatotoxic. So we'll go over a couple things like that, but yeah, it's not hepatotoxic. So then the second compound we're going to talk about is muscimol, which is whenever people are taking Amanita, it's most of the time this is what they're looking for. They hear about Amanita muscaria used for sleep and anxiety, helping with addictions, helping with PTSD or insomnia. And this is a GABA-A agonist, so other things that are GABA agonists are kava or alcohol, benzodiazepines, lavender, chamomile. So it's going to have more of that like body somatic effect, so it's like calming the nervous system, it's suppressing the fight or flight response in the body, and whenever you're dealing with trauma, having that suppressed for a time period is really, really helpful because it opens up that doorway for healing. Because if you're always fighting, you're not going to have time to rest and digest. Any questions on muscimol or ibotenic acid?
Just the comments, like if you overdose on benzodiazepines, you have similar stuff that you just talked about.
I'm sorry, what?
If you overdose on benzodiazepines, you're going to have the same side effects that just one of the
Yeah.
They're, you know, hot and, all
Yeah.
that stuff in moderation.
Right,
Similar effects.
and it's funny because benzodiazepines are used as an anxiolytic drug, but then whenever you take too much, or if you just take it for too long, it has a reverse effect, and then your anxiety and everything is worse. Part of the work that I do is I help people get off of benzodiazepines, and they're going through hell, a hell that I don't know. I've never taken a benzo drug. I never even knew about them really until I started working with Amanita, and people would message me and say, hey, I need help, like I'm withdrawing from benzos, and their brains aren't working properly, they have damage. So it usually is a long road of recovery, but I've seen a lot of success with people. So yeah, so we're going to demystify some of the toxicity and misunderstandings around Amanita. So Amanita muscaria, muscimol, ibotenic acid, they are not hepatotoxic, so they're not damaging to the liver. the Amanitas that are damaging to the liver contain amatoxins, and those are like Amanita phalloides or Amanita bisporgyria. Is that right? Okay, bisporgyria. Maria is my taxonomical confirmation. And there's other death caps and destroying angels, different taxonomical names, but that's one common misconception is like, oh, don't take Amanita, it's going to melt your liver. And it's like, well, which one? Different Amanitas.
And kidneys. And kidneys.
Yeah.
Cause dialysis.
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. Yeah, the phalloides and bisporgyria will melt your liver and stop protein synthesis, and you'll die within 3 days. But they look completely different than muscaria. So if you have, you know, any identification sense, you'll easily be able to tell them apart. It doesn't contain any mycotoxins, so mycotoxins are found in like mold, black mold. It doesn't contain mycotoxins. And then there's the ibotenic acid, brain lesioning. You know, that's really up for debate, but one thing I do know is that there are some people, there's like really small groups of people that are like Amanita raw purists. Like they think that if you dehydrate it, like you're like bastardizing it, and they're all crazy. Like they eat raw Amanitas all day, and they're just like, they have like some god complex going on. So I don't think that you should only eat raw Amanitas, but I think that trying a nibble here and there is something that I've been doing, and it's pretty interesting because it does create like a little bit of euphoria and speedy energy, and it's kind of fun. But that's something that I wouldn't recommend either. You know, that's a you thing if you're working with this mushroom.
Does it give you an upset stomach at all eating them raw like that?
It can, yeah. So I did an experiment. I have a YouTube video where I ate an Amanita and I like recorded myself like during the process. It's pretty funny. And I was like, I think it's hitting me right now. It was like 15 minutes. And I puked twice, but I ate like a potent one and I ate half of it. And I did an experiment actually. So I took this mushroom, I divided it in half, and I weighed both halves. And I ate the whole half raw, and then I took the other half and I dehydrated it, and I made a lemon tech tea and properly decarboxylated it. And I made a video of this whole thing to just say, look, I have the same mushroom, split in half, 2 different processes, 2 completely different experiences. Which is like another wild thing about this mushroom is like, depending on how you prepare it, if you eat it raw, if you dehydrate it, if you make a tea from it, it's going to be completely different. Whereas, in general, a lot of other things, it's fairly standard. You know, like if you eat a raw psilocybin mushroom versus a dry, it's not going to be a whole lot different. Maybe Tyler or Travis could speak to that, but I think raw versus dry, you know, not much of a difference. Yeah, live enzymes. Yeah. Right. Like those, the polyphenols and the terpenes and the different. Yep. Right. The things, the unknown. Right. And then we get into the energetics and the prana and the energy of things. But yeah, whenever I nibbled the raw Amanitas, it didn't cause any stomach problems at all for me. When I ate like a half of one, yeah. And I know people, there's videos of people just eating big ones and they're a little goofy,
but
so
even,
I would not recommend
so
that.
even just a nibble, like you can feel the effects from it?
Yeah, it's like kind of microdosing ibotenic acid.
Yeah.
So if you feel called to, we're in Amanita season right now.
Yeah, it's
So yeah, we're just going to go through an overview of different isoxazole-containing Amanitas. So muscimol and ibotenic acid are not tryptamines; they're called isoxazoles. And we're going to talk about the ones local to North America. So we have the yellow fly agaric. If you guys live anywhere in northern, eastern United States, you're maybe familiar with this mushroom. It grows mostly under eastern white pines and spruce trees, but it also can be found growing under some deciduous trees like birch trees. It has a mycorrhizal relationship with the trees around it. So and bacteria. So it's growing out of the soil. The mycelium is the actual organism growing in the soil, and it has to have a symbiotic relationship with trees around it. It can't just be artificially produced like some mushrooms can be, unless you recreated the entire environment, which would, yeah. And then we have, so Gisawii or Chrysoblema, it's undergoing taxonomical changes. That's a yellow fly agaric. So it's very similar in effect and potency to the European red muscaria. And then we have local pantheroids. So these are Pantherina, not Pantherina, but they're called pantheroids. True Pantherina only grows in Europe. But we have pantheroids all throughout the Western world. The ones local to this area are velatipes or subvelatipes and multisquamosa. These are going to be somewhere between 3 to 4 to 5 times stronger in muscimol and ibotenic acid than the yellow fly agarics. But that's not a complete list. There's also a ton of other pantheroids and other things like that.
Do the pantheroids have like the 3 rings at the base of the stipe, like the muscarias do?
Yeah, like the velatipes or velatipes, it does sometimes have the 3 rings, but the multisquamosa has like a sac of vulva. So you gotta be careful with that because bisporgyria also can have a sac. Yeah, so there's other identifying factors, and personally I don't really mess with them because it's really strong. I don't really think I need it. But if you know, I know tons of people who pick them and use them. So, any more questions about? Well, we're going to go over a little bit of the, and then we have we have a lot of international muscaroids. But if you live in the southeast of the United States, we have Amanita persicina, or the southern peach Amanita. It looks very similar to the yellow fly agaric, but it typically has more of like a peachy color. And then to the west, we have Amanita muscaria variation formosa. We have what else is it? Flavel vulvata, and I think that might be it. There might be a couple of different ones. Yeah, and then there's other pantheronoides and pantheroids out west too, some of which are probably some of the strongest Amanita muscaria or muscaroids in the world. Although the strongest one recorded is Amanita ibotenigaki, which is in Japan, and it's like really, really strong. I don't know what the dose would be, but it's probably in the milligrams for like a kind of a heavy dose.
It's a gray strip in the middle.
The gray strip in the middle is the sad Midwest that doesn't have muscaroids. Also, where there's, I mean, people have fun there, but it's not
Not much.
Yeah. Now there are Midwest psilocybe species too, and if you want to learn more about Midwest psilocybe species, talk to Alan Rockefeller and what's his name? I totally just drew a blank. Eric Hensley. Eric Hensley has a book out. So yeah, we're gonna just go through picking and preparing. So we're going to identify the Gisawii a little bit deeper because I'm assuming most of you are foragers or might want to know about this and live in this region. So we have the yellow flag agaric, the variation Gisawii, or Chrysoblema. This mushroom it contains muscimol, it contains ibotenic acid. One of the biggest characteristics to identify this mushroom is there are 3 concentric rings around the base, and it's a kind of a bulbous shape. Those 3 rings can disappear. Sometimes whenever they're taller, they get a little older, those rings kind of stretch out and they turn into almost invisible bands. But you can see different stages of life. We have orange to yellow caps with white to kind of like cream colored warts. The mushrooms will start off like they'll have a universal veil, so it's not all Amanitas and it's not exclusive to Amanitas, but these mushrooms have a universal veil. So they come out and they have like a little egg that covers them. And whenever it's raining and it's like nice and warm, they come up and they got this little egg, and then it starts to crack. And once it cracks, then the cap will grow up and the stem's growing up, and the cap will widen, and then the partial veil, which is under the gills, becomes the skirt. It falls off, and then the gills are revealed. But those warts or those dots on the top are actually remnants of that universal veil, that original veil. So sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Like if it just rained, the warts might wash away. So you could find something, you're like, oh, look, this looks like an Amanita, but it doesn't have any warts on it. It could be the rain. So you're looking for that concentric ring. You're looking for that bulbous base. And if you're not familiar with it, you're not feeling good about it, just pass it up. Because it's better safe than sorry. So there are some, they do grow through September, November typically, but I've even seen them in June or like late May if the season's all wacky. Like I know people around this area have been finding them in June and July. But typically we have heavy flushes whenever it's like turning into fall. So right now is pretty good. If we had consistent rain, we would have a lot more flushes. Yeah.
Which one of these qualities distinguishes it from its lookalikes?
So a couple of them do. So there are, the concentric ring is like usually the dead giveaway, but it would have to have that and like the cap color. Also it has like a white stem that can be kind of shaggy or smooth, but it's typically got like a little bit of shag on it. Some of these lookalikes are Amanita flaviconia, so that's the yellow patches Amanita. That one's actually edible, so that's not to worry, but you want to make sure you're identifying it correctly. It's really small in stature. I mean, they don't get usually any more than like 8 to 10 inches tall. They have like a little yellow stem, yellow warts, so they have yellow warts and a gold cap instead. Amanita praecox, and then Amanita flavorubens is the yellow blusher, so that one's also edible. I'm drawing a blank on Amanita praecox if that's edible or not, but it can look like Gasalii. Then we have Parcel bovata. So this one's kind of funny. It almost looks like a pure red Amanita from Europe, and people are always taking pictures like, what? I saw a red Amanita, is totally muscaria. And they have more like, I think it's a striate margin. They have tiny little white warts, and those are also edible. And then we have Amanita frostiana, which there's some debate on that. It might be Gasalii with just different phenotypes, and it might actually contain muscimol, but typically that's going to have like more of a longer, more narrow stem. It'll be pretty big too, but that seems to grow more north than here. Yeah.
Do the lookalikes also have muscimol? Yeah, I'm kind of guessing it seems.
So just the frostiana might. The rest of them are edible. I'm not 100% on the praecox, but the rest of them are actually edible, so it's not to worry.
But are they going to have the same muscimol qualities?
Well, the frostiana, I don't think it's really been studied that much. And there's speculation that it actually might be Gasalii or chrysolemma. So that's the only one, but typically I've only really heard of those in like Canada, or like maybe up in Maine. I'm not sure. Have you ever found a frostiana?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're more north. But so, and these are going to be distributed They can even go down to like North Carolina. They're going to be going up to Quebec and over to, I think, even Minnesota, through Michigan. You know, this whole area that we're in, like the Eastern Panhandle, United States, like Appalachia area, it's really covering that. But then whenever you get down into like South Carolina, Georgia, and the southern states, it's more of the southern peach Amanita, the Persicina. How's everybody doing? Vibe check? Feeling good? Nice.
What about this champagne? I can't remember the
Oh,
scientific name for it.
is it Amanita crenulata?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that one, Amanita crenulata doesn't really look like Gasawii, but I believe it is psychoactive.
Yeah, six
Yeah.
sections.
Yep.
Compounds, right?
Yeah, and also Amanita gemata, or the gemmed Amanita. Yeah.
So, do you know if everything in section A and it is muscimon and idle containing?
I'm not sure on that. I don't think so. I'm not, the sections confuse me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we have, so just a run through, we have muscaria, which is the red and white mushroom. We have the red and white mushroom. It's the most common around the world. The Formosa and flavobovata that grow on the west coast can also look like this muscaria. True muscaria grows, I believe it's in Alaska, Siberia, all throughout Europe, New Zealand, Australia, and yeah, I believe that is it. But then we have pantherina. Amanita pantherina is 3 to 5 times stronger muscimol and ibotenic acid. That grows in Europe. Amanita regalis, so that's the royal Amanita. It's slightly more potent than muscaria. Amanita persicina is the southern peach, yellow fly agaric, chrysoblema, or Gasawii. Subspecies flavobovata. And then Amanita pantherinoides is a scary one. That one grows out west, and it is very, very strong. I personally have tried this very small dose and had a very intense experience. And if anybody's ever watched Joe Rogan's interview with Paul Stamets talks about his panther trip that he did with his friends, and it's kind of a funny story. It worked out fine for him, but you know it can be dangerous, so I don't advise picking that one.
Does the pantherina grow in America too, the West Coast, or no?
So not true pantherina, but we are called pantheroids. So they're like pantherina, but they're technically true pantherina only in Europe. Yeah. All right, so we've picked our Amanitas, we've identified them properly. Now we're going to go through preparation. So typically you would want to dehydrate them, and some people may want to nibble them raw, but if you want to dehydrate them to prepare them for like a tea or a tincture or making it into a salve or an oil infusion, then you would want to dehydrate it. Here we have a chart of dehydration. If you want to look at this chart in more detail at another point, you can take a picture, or you can also go to a Facebook group that I help admin. It's called Amanita Muscaria Science and Magic page, and we have tons of studies and charts and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah.
So if you're making a tea out of these mushrooms, are you throwing away the tea, keeping the mushroom, or are you keeping the tea?
So if you're trying to have a psychoactive experience, you would want to drink that tea.
Okay.
But Amanita muscaria can also be used for a culinary purpose, non-psychoactive. What you do is you boil it for like 10 minutes, you discard the water, you boil it again in a new batch of water, discard the water, and then boil it again, and then you're left with like mushy noodle mushrooms that some people like. I don't know, I'm not about that, but like, you know, whatever floats your boat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of edible mushrooms. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you know, tomato, whatever. So yeah, if you want to have a psychoactive experience, you would make a tea from it and drink the water, not throw it away. You can also eat those mushrooms afterwards too, because they might have more actives in them. But you also may want to just discard those because there could be a lot of chitin in the mushrooms that could give you an upset stomach. But that's personal preference. So there's a lot of this chart is great because it goes through like different dehydration temperatures and times, 122 degrees Fahrenheit to 140, and there's basically it's like you could nuke it and also decarboxylate more, but if you dehydrate it at a lower temperature or freeze dry it, you would actually preserve the ibotenic acid, which can then be further decarboxylated through the tea preparation. So some people say, hey, I got fully decarbed caps, they're ready to go. And I think it's a total gimmick. I would love to test those caps because I don't think that that's a real thing, unless you just cook the hell out of them and there's nothing left anyway. So I think that low and slow is better for most things. But if you're gonna eat these mushrooms dry, just like little chips, and you wanted to have more decarboxylation, then you might want to dehydrate it at a higher temp. But typically, most people are going to be making a tea after this.
So your sweet spot is for making a tea? The 120,
Yeah.
What happens if you go lower?
If you go lower, you're going to have more ibotenic acid, but that's not a problem if you do a further decarboxylation with the tea preparation, which I'll explain the full decarb method. So, everybody following me?
What percent decarb is it at that temperature? Do you know?
122 degrees Fahrenheit. So, I think this is in Celsius. I think I'll have to get back to you on that because I did the conversion on my notes,
Okay.
but this is in Celsius. So, yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Yeah. It's just like kind of in the middle where it's like you have dehydrated it enough, but you're not like you're not like getting an overall potency loss as much.
Right.
There's always a little bit of oxidation, but it's like as low as possible with still doing some decarb. You have a question?
Oh no, I just couldn't read it from back there.
Oh, you're good. Yeah.
So if you're boiling it twice and dumping the water to make it edible,
Right, with no psychoactive properties.
is that what the problem is? Is that why people don't want to just cook them? If they
Yeah.
really want them
Yeah.
for food.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's
yeah.
what
So if
you
you're
would
like,
do.
I only want to eat these, I don't want to have any psychoactive experience,
Okay.
you would boil them multiple times and discard the water each time.
Okay.
But if you want to have a psychoactive experience, you would
You want that water.
drink that water because that's the good stuff. Yeah. Yep.
It's not a different poison.
Right,
that they're
right.
living in.
And just a little side note, personal experience. I had a friend, some friends had a party, and it was a Thanksgiving event, and we were out having a fire, and somebody's like, "Hey, Michael, there's these mushrooms here. You're the Amanita guy. Look, these are Amanitas." And I was like, "Yeah, there's a pine tree, and there's like these yellow fly agarics here." And they were all eager to have this experience, and I was like, guys, we don't have any lemons, we're not dehydrating them, like we're not doing it right. And they were like, well, basically we want to accept the consequences.
Well, we're doing it.
And I was like, okay, but here's the thing, I'm gonna try it first, but like I'm gonna try it, I'm gonna wait a little bit, but it's gonna take 2 hours for this to fully kick in, and they were all eager. So we took these raw mushrooms and we boiled them for like 40 minutes just to see if it would decarb it a little bit more, and they were very strong. I did a calculation and I estimated like what a dose would be, and I took like a moderate dose, and I had a really good time. I felt like I was like Santa Claus or something. I was like on the edge of 2 different worlds, and then another guy he passed out, and then somebody else had a seizure briefly. So, and I told them like, hey, I know that like I'm not responsible for this basically, but so just boiling them raw, it doesn't do it. You have to dehydrate them, and then you have to do further steps, which we'll get into now. But we did it for science. So you've identified your mushrooms, you've dehydrated them. You You store them in an airtight container, in a cool, dark place, in a jar perhaps. There's a lot of different ways to prepare it. I like to think that this mushroom is almost as versatile as cannabis. So you can eat it, you can smoke it, you can eat it raw or dehydrated, you can make a tea from it, you can make an oil infusion, and you can also vape or smoke like a dried resin form. So there's a lot of different ways to use this mushroom. If you're going to make a tea, you can do a full decarb or a partial decarb. So whenever you dehydrate it, like we were talking about with Selma, you're going to partially decarboxylate it by dehydrating it. But it's not fully decarbed. So you can boil it in water. That's going to decarb it a little bit more because decarboxylation happens the same way as it does with cannabis when you're making edibles. You would you need pH or heat heat to change that chemistry. So water alone isn't going to do it unless you do like a 12-hour neutral pH boil, which is one method. But the Austin patent is what most people would go to. So you do a full decarb by boiling the mushrooms for 3 hours at a pH of 3. So you have to use either straight lemon juice or you have to bring down that pH with something like citric acid or another type of acid to lower the pH. And then you boil that at 100 degrees Celsius, which is, you know, unless you live on a mountain, it's the boiling temperature, boiling point of water. So after you do this Austin patent, which you can look that study up online or at our Facebook group, you have fully successfully decarboxylated Amanita muscaria from ibotenic acid to muscimol. So that's one method people do, and they could either drink that right there, or you can let it cool and you can make microdose ice cubes, which is a really easy way to start working with Amanita. That's how I started working with Amanita for like 3 to 6 months. Very easy to start.
It's probably pretty sour at that point, right?
It's very sour, yeah. It's not my preference.
Yeah.
I like a partial decarb. That's my preference. But, you know, gotta tell people every option. So you can also make a tincture from it. Muscimol is highly soluble in water, poorly soluble in ethanol, but it's highly soluble in methanol. But if you're going to use a methanol extract, I don't recommend it, but you can evaporate off the methanol to make it safe. But I don't.
Alcohol?
Isopropyl alcohol, I'm not sure about.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You can also do an oil infusion. So there's no studies on like oil extractions, but people have been using oil to extract Amanita for a long time. Like Russian grandmas have been doing it, so I always trust that. And I, made my own oil infusion. And I tried it, and I went in with skepticism but open, and they actually work really well. So then you can incorporate that oil infusion into like a salve or a balm, which I've done that too. And I've tried almost every single preparation you can do with this mushroom because it's just so fascinating to me. Any questions about that? Yeah. Lactobacillus, thank you. Yes, that is another method. So this is also potential part of the soma theory was the use of raw milk. So thank you for bringing that up. So lactobacillus is the bacteria in yogurt. It's found in it's a probiotic. It's found in, when you take probiotic supplements, it's like the main one usually. But lactobacillus can also decarboxylate muscimol into ibotenic acid. So in theory, I don't know, I know that Trent Austin did a study on introducing lactobacillus, and I believe it was a full decarb. I don't know what would happen if you tried to make like yogurt with raw milk and Amanita in there. I don't know if that does a full decarb or like a partial. We haven't lab tested it? Yeah, exactly. We need to lab test that. So if anybody wants to make Amanita yogurt, hit us up. We'll send it to a lab. We'll send it to a lab. There's a lot of labs that are testing now, not so much in the past.
Well, yeah, there was one lab and it was $800 a test.
Yeah.
Now labs have a standard, so it's been brought down to like $50.
Yeah. and I've spent that 800 on tests. Florida Research Labs in they're in Oregon, Grants Pass, Oregon. They were like the original muscimole testing lab. They worked with the DEA too, but now there's dozens of labs that do muscimole tests because they have the standards.
Since you mentioned the DEA, what is the legality of Amanita?
That's a great question. So there is no regulation on Amanita muscaria. According to the FDA, it's not for human consumption, but it is it's unregulated, so it's unscheduled. In other parts of the world, mostly it's legal. Like there's, it's a Schedule 9 drug in Australia. And in other parts of Europe, I believe the Netherlands, it might be illegal, maybe not. It's also, technically, you're not allowed to consume it in Louisiana. It's for ornamental purposes, so just...
Well, you're not allowed to consume it anywhere, technically.
Well, you can consume it, you just can't sell it as food.
Right.
Yeah, so like the FDA, I'm not going to go to jail for selling you Amanita and telling you to eat it. The FDA will say, hey, you can't do that. But it's not a criminal thing. Now, if you're in Australia, that's a Schedule 9 drug. That's serious. It's kind of low on the offense scale, but yeah. Any more questions before we move on to dosage and experience? So, microdoses, we're going to talk about different dose sizes. So, you can see this threshold is very large. So 50 milligrams to 3 grams is what I would consider a microdose. So that depends on a lot of different things. It depends on the mushroom itself, because you could have one mushroom growing beside another one and it could be 10 times stronger or weaker. So whenever I microdose or make a batch, I like to take a lot of mushrooms and do like 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 pounds or 6 pounds in an extraction. The more the better, because you get more of an equal dose. You don't get like a low dose or a hot dose, you get more homogenized. So you can take a bunch of mushrooms, grind them up, do your tea, make your capsules, whatever you need to do. Also the age of the mushrooms too. So Amanitas will rapidly lose potency like after a year. There's more studies coming out. There's a lot more different storage method studies coming out with Amanita. So, and then also too, how you prepared it, if you did prepare it. So if you're having, a tea, did you boil it long enough? Did you boil it hot enough? Did you strain it well enough? There's a lot of different factors there. Some of the experiences you might have with a microdose is just a slight reduction in anxiety, depression, insomnia, or a major effect in those. Everybody's sensitivity is also different too. That's a huge factor. Dreams, yes. Yeah, the Amanita can oftentimes come to people in dreams, maybe even before they even knew what the mushroom was. It's more of these like interesting synchronicities that can happen with this mushroom. And I know I had a lot of funny dreams whenever I first started working with Amanita, and it helps with sleep, but sometimes you have like a wacky dream that wakes you up, and then you're like, oh, like it's a little hard to get back to sleep. Usually that's kind of like in the first couple months. After like the first couple weeks or months, that usually goes away. And there are not really many side effects, so like whenever I was taking Amanita in these really small doses, I'm talking 50 milligrams. And some other people too, you might experience like a slight irritability, like on the day off. You might feel like a little agitated. I think that there's a lot of things that could be a factor for that. Could be how your GABA receptors are working. Could be how, what it's bringing up for you. Like if you're, calm and then the next day you're not that feeling, like what is that, what is being uncovered, what is in that shadow of like, okay, now we're touching on this part of me that I may not have experienced before or had conscious awareness of. And the interesting thing with Amanita is that some people would say that Amanita actually kind of gets into deeper and more recessed trauma than something like psilocybin. Now, this is all subjective, but I think that's a very common thing I've heard with people is like, nothing got me deeper than Amanita. And I've found that is true for me, and I've also worked with a lot of different psychedelics as well. But everybody's journey is different. So typically, you know, these microdoses, those major changes with trauma and everything, those are happening on like very elongated, you know, processes, like, you know, weeks and months on end. And I like microdosing too because it's kind of like the integration is like built in. So you're like working with this mushroom and then something comes up, and then if you're really working on yourself and maybe you're meditating or doing some other, you know, journaling, therapy, whatever, you can process a lot of those experiences. If you're taking large doses, it can be kind of this world-shattering, catastrophic, apocalyptic experience that you might need to integrate for a very long time. So I'm a personal fan of microdosing. Also, it's more accessible to people that may have time obligations to their children, or different, you know, work obligations, or maybe their mental health can't handle an ego-shattering event. You know, maybe they have schizophrenia or like psychotic, you know, tendencies. Microdosing seems to be more accessible for people. Now, the threshold dose is kind of a sweet spot, 2 grams to 15 grams. Now, there's overlap with the microdose for the reasons I explained. The most I've ever taken, I think, was like 15 grams, and it was really interesting. You know, you kind of get into this liminal space with the mushroom where, you know, time dilation, you know, things might feel longer or shorter. You know, I remember I took a bath one time and it felt like I was there for a couple minutes, and then I looked at my clock and it was like 45 minutes later. And I was just in this trance in the tub, like totally at peace and like totally just one with myself and the experience. And that's something that comes up too with Amanita, is that, you know, maybe psilocybin or LSD or different plant medicines can, they can connect you with yourself, but oftentimes too, like you may hear these stories of like extraterrestrials or outer dimensional beings, and that's all, you know, speculative or subjective, but Amanita muscaria is really about you and what you're going through and your story and how you can bring more of that to light. Then we have, yeah, go ahead.
So if there's a big span of which microdose works for a person,
Yeah.
how would they know how much time to actually before going on the
Yeah, great question. So she was asking if there's a large area of, you know, speculation on what is a microdose for somebody. The best thing to do is to make a really big batch and do it right, or start with a small batch, but if you start with a large batch and you keep that batch, you know how strong that is. So if I take 1 gram's worth of that, I know that if I double that the next day or so, that I will potentially have twice the experience, maybe wait a couple days. But it takes about 2 hours for the full effects to kick in. Yeah.
So when you're seeing the grams in there, but you're preparing with like water, or
Yeah.
a lemon pack or something,
Right.
how are you saying how much are you going by the grams of the original
Yes.
dried capsicum
Yes.
you did?
Yep.
You put in the batch.
Right, so with that, then you would do grams per volume. So you want to record your initial weight, and then whatever the volume is, you measure the volume of the water, and then you divide that by the grams, and that would give you your grams to volume ratio. Yeah.
On the duration side, like psilocybin is around like 4 to 6 hour, like go back to normal life.
Yeah.
LSD's 8 to 12.
Yeah. So in a really high dose experience, it could be like 14 hours. Lower dose is like 6 hours. What time is it? Am I like way over time? Oh my god.
Well, yeah, but you started.
Are you doing a talk now? All right. Is it at 7? Oh, okay. Well, I should probably finish. I have like a lot. Let me just run through. Heroic dose, don't do it yet.
You also
Don't do it yet. I started like a lot later, but let's get through it. I have so much I could talk about, but this is the most important part. Don't buy Amanita muscaria gummies in a gas station or a CBD store. Most of the gummies that are quote-unquote Amanita muscaria don't even contain muscimol. A lot of them actually contain synthetic tryptamines like 4-ACO-DMT, catolactones, and a lot of other things. If you need Amanita products, obviously I sell them, but you can go to our Facebook group that we have, the Amanita muscaria Science and Magic page, and we have a whole list of vendors internationally. These are some tests that I ran with Flora Research Labs and detected no muscimol, but they had psilocybin in them, which is, it was probably 4-ACO-DMT. So this is really giving Amanita muscaria a bad rep because not many people have tried it, so they don't know what to expect.
Give a shout out to your Facebook page is really informative.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been there.
So here's, oops, I'm going backwards. Here we go. So Amanita muscaria Science and Magic page, we have a vendor product review list, the vendors list, the Reddit r/Amanita muscaria, and then if you like to read, the Flyagar Compendium is a really great book. You can buy it on Amazon. I also have it at my booth over here. I have tinctures, oils, salves, dried Amanitas, and other products. And then I'm also working with Kevin Feeney and a couple other experts to develop the Amanita muscaria masterclass. So it'll be a chapter by chapter video series online. Yeah, the conclusion. I really love this mushroom and I love to talk about it, and I love the way that I'll wake up in the morning and check an email and another person said like, this mushroom has helped, should change my life, and I couldn't have done it without it, so thank you. So I love to share that wisdom and the wisdom of the mycelium and the mushrooms, and just want to thank you guys for all of your attention, and yeah, thank you. So yeah, if you want to